You're on mute.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then, wait, there's still people popping in here. Jeremy, do you have access to let people in?
I do, and I have been.
Cool. All right. So then you can keep an eye on that for us, please.
You got it.
All right. We left off on, first off, let's recap. Any questions on the first 10 pages of the contract? Anything you guys want to go through? Anything that you guys encountered within the last week or last 2 weeks doing a contract, filling out the contract? Any questions on this? Are we good?
I did have a question. Maybe we could just go over this real quick. I did have a question from one of our agents about the appraisal.
Okay.
So basically, if we don't have the appraisal back yet, it automatically extends. But common practice, I told her, I said I would still write up the addendum like business as usual and kick it out just in case, because if you get the appraisal back and you still don't have it clear to close, then your earnest money goes hard.
Okay, so what do you mean by it automatically extends?
That's what the new contingency says.
All right, you want to? Let's talk about it. What to show me? I'm from Missouri. You got to show me.
Oh, please, I'm letting people in.
Well, I'm only from Missouri sometimes, but this morning I am.
Missouri.
Show me the money.
Show me. Show me this.
What are we talking about? Which page?
I don't know.
Are you talking about the financing approval?
Yeah,
here?
sure. Let's go with that. Financing.
Okay. Why do I have two chats open? Oh, all right. All right. So you said, what was your question about appraisal?
Okay, so the new Scott, help me out here. Come on, bro. You know what I'm talking about. The new thing that basically says if the appraisal is not back, it automatically kicks out the financial contingency to extend until the appraisal is received.
And where do we see that?
I don't know, bro. It's in here somewhere. Page,
Well, I'm looking at it. We have the screen up. Point it out. What line?
1 through 10. 1 through 10.
1 through 10.
It's on somewhere between page 1 through 10.
Oh, well, okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, sir. I'm looking at it
All
right
right,
now.
so I'm on the financing clause, and it says the contract is contingent upon, and you have a blank line, if left blank, 30 days, right? Loan approval period. Buyer obtaining approval of and which type of loan, and you should be filling in the boxes. All right, it's either a conventional, FHA, VA, or other. Could be a hard money loan. Mortgage loan for purchase of property for check 1, fixed, adjustable, or fixed or adjustable. And then initial interest rate not to exceed. If you leave it blank, it will be the prevailing rate based on market or buyer's credit worthiness. And for a term of, and it's usually a 30-year loan, but that could differ. I've seen more years now being added to mortgages. So those are questions that you have for the loan officer. Buyer's mortgage broker or lender having received an appraisal or alternative valuation of the property satisfactory to the lender, if either is required by the lender, which is sufficient to meet the terms required for the lender to provide financing for the buyer and proceed to closing. Quotation appraisal. Buyer shall make an application within 5 days if left blank after the effective date and use good faith and diligent effort to obtain a loan, to obtain approval of a loan meeting the financing and appraisal terms of paragraph 8B, 1 and 2A, loan approval. And that's what we're talking about right here, right? Paragraph 8. Within the loan approval period and thereafter to close this contract, loan approval, which requires buyer to sell other real property shall not be considered loan approval unless rider V is attached. Where else are we going here? Buyer's failure to use good faith and diligent effort to obtain a loan approval during the loan period shall be considered a default for purposes of yes.
155, line 155, please.
Thank you.
Well, it's Paula Parker Williams. Of course, I found it.
All right, so this is title, evidence, and insurance. What does that have to do with appraisal?
Paula Parker Williams, what happened? All right, Scroll up pretty, please.
Are you talking about lines 126, which is paragraph, this one here? But if the buyer has timely provided either written notice provided in paragraph 8B above, the buyer therefore after fails to close on this contract, the deposit shall be paid to the seller.
I'm sorry, I was looking at FAR's red line version. It used to be 155 where it scratched out that section 3 about the appraisal. I apologize.
It says specifically excluding the appraisal valuation,
Yes.
but I'm still not getting what the question is, Jeremy. What's the question? Because you're saying that it automatically extends if you don't have an appraisal done? Where do we?
If the appraisal is not back yet.
I don't see where that automatically extends.
Okay.
So the appraisal was made part of the loan approval process. So the appraisal has to come back during the loan approval period, whatever time period is put in the contract. So if they don't have it by then, there's not an automatic extension. You'd have to put that into a separate addendum at that time.
Correct.
Otherwise, the escrow becomes hard money and it's subject to being lost if the loan approval doesn't take effect. And that's the seller's option.
So Doug, would that mean we'd all be smart to just start adding our appraisal contingencies just to cover everything for our purchaser?
Well, I think that might be a little bit better, but the standard appraisal contingency has a time period for getting the appraisal in the addendum. I'm talking about the appraisal contingency addendum. If you utilize that, then that's still a hard date for getting the appraisal, and it doesn't have any type of extension if you don't get it. It basically just says that the property has to appraise for the sales price, and if it doesn't, then the buyer can cancel the contract. So yeah, I think it's good. You could also just add some language to the contract in the notes section, stating that the contract, the appraisal time period is a little bit longer if you're concerned about it.
You can always do an extension for the financing period as well,
Yes.
which will cover your appraisal.
So I think
Because-
the bottom line is you really just have to pay close attention to the deadline. You've got a
Right.
loan approval period includes the appraisal. Let's say that's 30 days, 45 days. As you get close to the deadline, you better make sure the appraisal is about to be finished. If not, then you should do something with the contract to extend it.
If you're on the buyer's side of the transaction, I would definitely be requesting an extension of the financing period. And we've talked about this in the previous sessions. There is a difference. One is financing period, one is a closing period. Don't confuse the two. They are attached, but they are not the same. So it doesn't automatically extend, Jeremy. It's included within that 30 days if you leave it blank right here on line 89. So I'm in form simplicity for all of you, where I do my forms, or transaction desk, same thing. This is form simplicity though. So be aware of this period, of this right here, very important. Are we clear with that, Jeremy? Are you good? As far as the appraisal and all that? Did that answer the question?
I'm still looking because I could have sworn that we went over something that had, you know, like something where now if there wasn't a satisfactory appraisal back or the appraisal wasn't back, then it automatically extended like 7 days or something like that. I'm gonna look for it on my end, keep going, and then I'll interrupt you if I find something that, you know, that references what I'm talking about.
Okay. I think what you're talking about is this here, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau closing disclosure. Is that what you're talking about? Which actually does extend the closing for 7 days, if you notice here on line 59 and 60. And what that means is if the The loan approval has been obtained, but the lender's underwriting is complete. But you're still waiting on the requirements for the closing disclosures or the Protection Bureau, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau closing disclosure. You're waiting for the CD disclosure requirements. Then yes, it does get extended. Am I
Okay.
right in what I just said, Doug?
Yes, but that's not appraisal related.
That has nothing to do with appraisal.
True that, Boo. Okay. As you were. Please
Okay.
continue.
All right. So any other questions going back, recapping on what the pages that we've covered already on the as is? Are we good? Are we clear on the financing clauses and closing clauses? Okay. One thing I wanted to point out, this is something internal here at HomeSmart, but I know some of you charge your transaction fee to the buyer and or the seller. You know, that $350 that you guys owe to HomeSmart. If you are doing that, this is the section where to do it. If you see it on my screen, if you're charging it to the seller, you would put it here under other. And you just write $350 transaction fee paid to HomeSmart. All right, very simple. And if you're charging the buyer, you do it here on line 154. Okay, and that'll help Scott put it on the closing statement.
Frederico,
Yes,
so you wouldn't put it in the listing agreement?
on the seller side, you can. Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
But remember, when you send this to title's not going to know what you have on a listing agreement because they don't see the listing agreement. So why not disclose it on the contract?
true that, Boo.
I know I do an extra invoice, if you want to call it that, to title, informing them about the listing agreement and the fee for my sellers. Because I don't want to go back and forth and modify a contract and have them reinitial. Once they sign, it's done.
Well, that's why you should do it right from the get-go. Put it in there and say, hey, my brokerage charges a transaction fee. It's $350. And if you decide to waive it, now you look like a hero. Right? Hey, I'm saving you more money. Check it out. So, but this is where you it should be disclosed at the time of contract. That I know it's disclosed on the closing statement. I get it. But why not disclose it from the very beginning? Okay, so
if you're working with the seller, you disclose it for the seller on the contract here.
right here
With the
on line 140,
Okay, if you're working with the buyer, then 154, line 154.
right here.
Okay,
Or you can always add it to the additional terms as well. But why, you know, I mean, it's easier just to put it in on the cost section of it, but you can add it here as well.
can
Okay.
you add it in both places just to make sure or no?
Nah, I mean, it's overkill. I mean, you can,
Okay,
but it's
Just-
overkill. Yeah.
okay,
And then that way, when title asks you, hey, does your brokerage charge a fee? You can say yes. And it's on the contract, and you could tell them it's on the contract. All right. Some title companies won't even ask you if it's on the contract or not. They just send you that buyer information sheet or that seller information sheet. And that question is usually on there. All right.
one more
All right,
question. Is
go
the new
ahead.
is the new as-is contract uploaded to all MLSs in Florida now?
You're looking at it. I'm in it. This is it.
Well, every,
The one on your screen, and I'm going to tell you how you see the difference. You see the bottom of the page here where it says
Gotcha.
Florida Realtors,
okay,
as is number 6, revised on 10/21.
Right. One thing I would like to add, Freddie, is that if you are using Form Simplicity and you're using a package, so if you created a package to get your contract, all the other disclosures, and you just keep using it, it will use the old version unless you go into packages in Form Simplicity and click update package. You have to
Oh,
do
really?
that, and then it'll update the entire package with the latest forms.
that's
I
I
it.
learned
That's a
that the
great
hard
tip.
way.
Thanks, Juan. Great tip.
Yep. Thank
I
you,
thought they
Juan.
would have removed the 5 already, or the old version. I thought they would have removed it, but obviously they haven't.
No, it still sticks in there, and I learned that the hard way. I clicked on it and say, what? It got rejected because of it. And then I saw inside Form Simplicity in the packages, click to update, and it does it. So that's kind of cool. It updates all the forms, any
Cool.
riders that you have in your package or anything like that.
Cool. And the other thing, important thing is, so you notice it's now a 6. Before the as is used to be a -5, right? It used to be a 5
Correct.
contract. Now it's a 6, which is right here, which means all the comprehensive riders and addendas are also now a 6. Does that make any sense?
Mhm.
And we're actually on that section of the contract where we're talking about the addendas right here. So this condominium rider, this would be the title of it, A, condominium rider. And then on the same thing, on the bottom of that condominium rider, right underneath the buyer's initials, it's going to say -6. It actually says it's labeled CR, comprehensive rider -6. I can open one up real quick. Close without saving. And let's do condo. Now, the important thing about these riders is I want to show you guys this as well, and I think I've showed you before. You have several different condo riders. Now, the difference is this one that I'm pointing at right here, the CRSP-16, that lines up with a different purchase contract. Okay, that does not go with the Florida Realtors, Florida Bar contracts. If you notice, it doesn't say that on type. So if you're doing an as-is contract, which is a Florida Realtors, Florida Bar residential contract, you should be using the -6, which is a Florida Realtors, Florida Bar contract and addendum. So there's a difference. This goes with the other purchase contract. And just to let you know, we have 2 Florida Bar contracts, Florida Realtor, Florida Bar contracts. Okay, you have the as-is, and you have the contract for residential sale and purchase. And let's go real quick to that. I'll show you the different contract. So you have the as-is, you have this one, the contract for sale and actually this is an addendum, sorry. This is the other one. Oh, actually, this is a Broward one. Sorry, I'm in the wrong one. Let's go to Florida. Okay. Contract for residential. So here you see it, CRSP. Here's the other contract. This is the other contract as well, which is also -6. So here you have 2. You have the as-is, which is the Florida Realtors contract. You have the residential contract for sale and purchase, which is a Florida Realtors contract. And the Florida Bar as well, sorry. And then you have the contract for residential sale and purchase. So it's different. So this is going to this contract takes all addendums that have CRSP. And the reason for that is because the addendums actually specify a certain paragraph in each contract, and that will not line up. And I'll give you an example. If you noticed on the as-is, the condo rider, and we'll go to the page where all the riders are and addendums, was A, right? It said condo rider A, but if you notice on this contract, A is additional clauses.
So Freddie,
Yes.
so Freddie, can you hear me? This is Tammy Harris up in Pensacola.
Hi, Tammy.
Hey, do you have a preference of avoiding, like for example, I avoid the crisp. I use the far bar or the as is.
Listen, I don't have a preference. They're all, you can use any contract you'd like, or that the buyer or the seller would like. I mean, I can tell you 95% of the time throughout Florida, everybody's using the as-is contract. And the reason for that is because the as-is, the difference between the as-is, I'm not even going to talk about the crisp, but the other residential contract, which is also
Far bar.
the
right?
far bar,
Yep.
and is that you have, that the seller actually has to perform some repairs.
Right.
Whereas to the as is, the buyer has an option to do the repairs himself.
Mhm.
The seller has the option to do the repairs, or both parties have the option to get out of the contract if not agreed upon.
Yes.
Freddie, quick question. Is it your policy you prefer us to use the as is my first question. And if we do use the non-as is, did Rider K change to make it the as is to a different rider? I couldn't find it the other day under Rider K.
Okay, let's start with the first part of your question. Preference in contract? No, I don't have one. Preference in listing agreement? Yes, absolutely. But we're not talking about listing agreements. We'll cover that later. And just to let you know, listing agreement that we require at HomeSmart, and the only one we should be using is the transaction broker listing, exclusive right of sale. Okay, transaction broker, not the one to consent to switch to transaction broker. The one you starting off the transaction right from the very beginning as a transaction broker. We are never a single agency at HomeSmart. Okay, just keep that in mind. We always start every transaction as a transaction broker. And we'll cover that when we get into listing agreements and things like that. So when you're doing a listing agreement, and it's actually the number for that is a ERS, exclusive right of sale -18, T as in transaction and B as in broker, TB. You have the other one that's TN, which is a notice to transition over, but the one we want is the TB. So going back to this, Paul, so your first, Paula, can you ask that question again?
Again, I've been taught to try and only use the as is because everybody gets a free look and everybody has that free chance to move on. But the
Correct.
as is, it's pretty complicated to a lot of people. I understand it. But a lot of times I may get presented an offer on my listing with a non-as is contract. And I usually countered back with Rider K to make it as is, if my seller, of course, chose to do that. Rider K kind of made it an as is and put in the right to terminate period. And I think they changed the rider this year. Is it the same? Do you know?
Okay, so the as is contract doesn't, I'm in the wrong, sorry. Let me do this
The
again.
non-as
As is
is.
contract doesn't have a rider for as is because it's already as is.
No,
That-
non-as is.
Okay. So you're talking about the other contract, right?
The
Not
non-as is, I know that there's an addendum an agent can use if they want to counter to make it the as is without having to rewrite it. It's a rider. Used to be Rider
It's
K.
the as is with right to inspect rider. Is that the one you're talking about? As is right to inspect?
I don't remember the title. I just remember it was the old Rider K. I have it open here. Let me see.
Here
if
it
I
is
can-
right here. So yes, I'll open it for you.
So is that the new version or the old one?
This is the -6. See it right here? So
Okay,
this is the
so they
revised
kept it-
1021.
They kept it Rider K. So that's, okay, thank you. You answered my question.
Okay, so as far as where they're located, that's Rider K, that didn't change. What they did was add some new riders and some revisions to the rider. But as far as the labeling of it, it's still gonna be K.
Thank you.
And that's, this is what you use for the residential's for sale and purchase contract.
Only if you want to change it to an as is.
Correct.
Right, okay.
All right, so let's go back to the as is. Any questions on addendum so far? So there are some new ones. Let's get to page 11. So if you know it, there's a condo association, check off this one. If there's a homeowner association, check off this one. Both of them really shouldn't be checked. It's either one or the other. Homeowners associations are for townhouses and single family homes, PUDs. Condo riders are obviously for condo. Now I have heard some, well, they have 2 associations and the seller wants it included. All right, so then you put both of them in, no big deal. Okay, seller financing, you have an addendum for seller financing. If the seller's taking back a mortgage for the buyer. A mortgage assumption. Do we all know what mortgage assumptions are? Assumable mortgages. Okay, FHA financing. Appraisal contingency. You have a short sale addendum here. Homeowners flood insurance. So make sure when you are doing a contract that you are looking up to see if flood insurance is required. If it is, I would include the rider. Interest-bearing account. These that say reserved are actually, these are blank addendums and they're saving these spots. And that's why they put reserved for future addendums.
Hey, Freddie, this is
Yes.
Michelle. I have a quick question, and it may be a stupid question. In regards to the homeowner's flood insurance addendum, I do
Yes.
own flood properties. When I list a house, should I fill that out and put it in the documents? Or is that only for the buyer side to fill out?
Well, it's a both, any rider is for both parties to fill out. And actually the seller should be filling it out. Let's open it up. Let's talk about it.
But it's really to protect the buyer's cost from a homeowner's and a flood insurance standpoint.
Correct. So it's basically just saying, hey, buyer, are you aware that you need flood insurance and that there's an additional cost to obtain flood insurance in Florida?
So, yeah,
Basic-
and in our MLS, we have to fill out whether or not flood insurance is required.
And
I've
it's
just never
actually-
done this addendum.
There's a paragraph in the contract as well for flood insurance.
Right.
Okay. I've just never used the addendum. That's why
Well, here it is. And if you notice, it'll say right here, paragraph 10D. And that's where it's referenced in the actual contract. And the buyer, it states that the buyer has 20 days
right.
to obtain coverage.
So, so Michelle, this is really to protect the buyer in case the flood insurance comes in at $5,000 and they were expecting 3,500.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this is for their due diligence. Okay. Hey, I need to get flood insurance. I know I need to get flood insurance. I can't wait till the day before closing to find out what that cost is going to be. And then if I don't agree to that cost, I can't just cancel the contract. It's got to be done within a certain period. And their due diligence for flood insurance on the contract is 20 days.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So back to the contract. Oh, I keep pulling up the wrong one. I'm in the wrong foot. That's Broward. Florida. Florida contracts. Okay, here we go.
It'd be awesome if Broward was part of Florida.
Well, you have regional contracts. I mean, most of the agents that up in Jacksonville typically don't use the as-is. They use a NEFAR, Northeast Florida Association of Realtors contract. So, like I said, 95% of the time, I want to say that numbers, they're using it. All right, so let's
But they're
go back
real
to,
good about taking the as-is. I've gone over to Jacksonville and that Ponte Vedra and they used St. John's and they took my as-is. They were real good about it.
okay. Yeah, so it's kind of, whatever's customary and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, an offer is an offer. I don't care what kind of contract you put it on, right? It's something to talk about. So,
Up in the Panhandle, they have a hard time when you submit as is and agree on as is. And then after you find something major during inspection, you submit a buyer's request for repairs. They don't really understand that up here, but we continue to educate them.
very good, Tammy. Thank you. Yeah. And that's actually the way it's supposed to work. Tammy just labeled it off. There is a form, and it's available in your forms, which is called the buyer's request and or remedies for repairs. So if you're, just because it's as is, it doesn't mean you can't, the buyer cannot ask for the seller to either compensate or repair things on the house.
Freddie, real quick, can you explain the difference between the crisp and the as is, as far as repair requests go?
Well, I briefly, I kind of mentioned it before, Jeremy, on the crisp. The seller has to fulfill certain obligations on certain repairs, and that's usually up to a dollar amount that's put into the contract. On the as is, everybody has an option.
This is Michelle, another major difference, only because I just went through this via legal hotline. If you use the CRISP contract and you don't change the verbiage, you are required to use licensed contractors only, and they do an inspection afterwards to make sure everything is done. So you need to change your verb. You need to put something in there that says professional contractors will be used for all fixes or something like that.
Licensed.
Thanks for sharing, Michelle.
I spent hours with legal hotline going over the CRISP contract. Oh, what a mess.
You and me both. I have them on speed dial. And you guys, you have that availability. Florida, that's a service provided by the Florida Realtors. You guys pay for it, so use it. You have attorneys there that you can call. And then you also have our friends over at Consumer Title, Doug and Scott, that are more than willing to help as well with interpretations of this.
Or Michelle, you can always blame it on your broker and say that you prefer the far bar and the as is.
Yes, I will.
That's what I
be the
do.
bad guy for you guys, or I could be the good guy for you guys. Yes, throw me under the bus. Absolutely.
I don't like the crisp. I think 2 is enough. I don't know why we have the crisp. Far bar and as is enough.
You know what? I've been doing this for 18. I don't think I've ever used a crisp, and I've been doing it for 18 years.
There's some other weird things about crisp at the top about the appliances that are included, et cetera. And there's a few other little weird things about how they calculate dates. So it's tricky, and we don't need to, knowing 2 and backwards and forwards is enough, in my opinion.
I mean, our job is to make this easy, right?
Mhm.
Not harder. And we do have realtors out there that make a transaction harder, and instead of trying to smooth out the road bumps, they just elevate them. So, yeah. All right. So, any other questions here so far? Are we good? So, I want to.
Freddie,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Question for you: what would be the problem or issue that you would see with using the buyer's request for repairs and or remedies in a real life situation?
What do you mean the problem?
What potentially could come up in a transaction that would make it harder to close?
If the lender sees it.
I was trying to get Freddie to say that. Come on, Michelle. I recently had this situation where the agent wrote into the addendum saying, and didn't use the buyer's request for repairs or remedies, and said, hey, we want a credit for this amount or price reduction in lieu of repairs. And the lender saw it and blew up. So what's the potential downfall with that, Mr. Rodriguez?
Well, the potential downfall is that the loan gets disapproved. Obviously, you just mentioned that. So yeah, lenders don't want to see repairs.
Okay. And what's a possible remedy that you would advise if somebody does make that mistake and obviously doesn't have a time machine?
Possible remedy. Okay. So if the buyers, so every scenario is different, Jeremy. It would depend on the scenario, what the repairs are, if the seller's willing to help with the repairs or not. I would be extending inspection periods. If agreed upon, certain repairs are agreed upon, I would ask for, the buyer should be requesting extension of inspection period so that they can do a re-inspection after the repairs are completed. I would be extending the financing period, because obviously if you're extending one, you're gonna extend the other.
Well, what if somebody made the mistake already and it's too late and they requested a credit, the seller gave a credit, and they put in lieu of repairs, and the lender is now seeing this and going, what's going on? What repairs need to be done? Let me see the inspection report.
You can have it done instead of towards repairs. It would have to be, the verbiage should have to be towards buyer's closing costs or prepaids.
Remember, there is no
No,
time machine.
right,
This cat is
right.
already out of the bag.
Well, most
Right.
lenders would understand, and you just do another addendum that says what Freddie just says, and then that's the one they share with the underwriter.
Correct.
Okay, and
Yeah,
let's say
some of
the
them do.
underwriter's already seen the wrong addendum.
Right. What I had to do one time was I had to not only indicate that it was repaired, and this is where it gets, dangerous. If the seller agreed to give them a concession in lieu of repairs, now there is no other way around it, and the repairs have to get done in order for the lender to approve the loan. There's going to have to be a separate agreement saying, okay, the buyer will repair it. Here's an inspection that says it has been repaired, and that has to be part of what goes to the underwriter, saying that that was taken care of. That's the only way I see around it.
Well, and then we could get even hairier about if it's something significant, such as roof,
Right.
we could put 150% of the estimate in escrow,
Yep.
and then the appraiser goes back out after closing and confirms that it was repaired to make the lender and the insurance agent happy.
So I had a situation where this had come up, and it was a septic system, and the lender just wasn't budging. They were like, we want this repaired.
Yeah.
I
Or
don't even know.
replaced.
Yeah, the replacement was the only option. So we did 150% holdback from the most moderately quoted person, and we needed 3 quotes, and all those contractors had to put in writing that they were willing to complete this repair with no upfront monies. They would be paid after closing, after an independent party had come out to verify that all the work was complete. And then, so the lender had to agree to hold the escrow money and do the holdback and everything like that. The buyer had to put, an additional 50% on top of the credit he had already received. So, I mean, there's ways around it, but obviously if you're writing up an addendum and you aren't 100% confident about what you're doing, please call myself, call Larry, call Freddie, call somebody who knows. We don't want you to have to purchase a time machine, DeLorean, whatever, and go back in time and fix this, or the transaction to fall apart. So that's all I want to say about that.
And you should be getting your guidance from the lender as well. Talk to the loan officer. Hey, this is going on.
Preach.
All right, are we cool with that? Everybody
sir.
good? All right, so if you notice here are the changes and the additions that was added to the addendas. They added the seasonal vacational rentals that was never there. So now you have a comprehensive rider for seasonal and vacational rentals. And you have a PACE disclosure. Does everybody know what PACE is?
What's a PACE disclosure?
Oh boy.
The one
Is
that
Scott,
gives
are
you-
you on? Doug, are you on?
Yeah, we're on.
That's the one that makes you require a pacemaker.
We're gonna need one of these for every deal, right?
That's exactly correct.
I thought if you were jogging along in a transaction, it was to help you keep an even pace.
Now,
Yeah.
let's let the pros talk about this. Scott, Doug, you want to chime in?
So PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. And basically it has to do with adding solar or wind or some other energy saving device to the home. And a lot of the counties offer, and some cities, I suppose, offer financing for that. And they will collect the payments as part of a special assessment that's done annually through taxes. So the PACE disclosure is letting the buyers know that that exists on this particular piece of property. And then there'll have to be a determination made as to how that's going to be addressed. If the seller's going to pay it off, if it's going to stay and the buyer's going to assume it. Most lenders want it resolved and out of the way, so usually has to be paid.
And here is the new form right here. And it's labeled EE. Have you noticed on here the CR-6? And real quick, it says property assessed clean energy programs provide financing to property owners for improvements to their real property for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and wind resistance, and repayment of the debt through annual property tax bill assessments on the property. So this is kind of like an assessment, just like a CDD. Is that right, Doug?
Yes, yes, very, very similar.
And so annual tax, property tax bill assessments on the property in Florida statutes, so on and so forth, states that the seller shall give the buyer a written disclosure statement in the form set below or at before the time buyer executes a contract to purchase property with a non-ad valorem assessment has been levied under the section of this and has unpaid balance due. So it's basically saying that the seller has this stuff on the property, he has it financed or assessed through their taxes, and he's disclosing that to the buyer. And like Doug said, some lenders will require this to be paid in full before they actually approve the loan. So be aware of this, okay? You're showing a house with solar panels. Are hurricane shutters included in that, Doug? Do you know?
I think they might be. It just has to do with the particular program as to what they're including. So I think it's going to vary.
Any questions on this? So this is a new rider, okay? New rider that was added. Let's go back to page 11, where all the addendas are. Okay, so you had those two new ones, the seasonal and the PACE were added. You also had the Miami-Dade County Special Taxing District. So obviously that's for properties in Miami-Dade, and Doug has covered this before, I think on one of our Ask the Experts.
Yeah, there's a municipal ordinance down there that addresses required disclosures for septic tanks.
Yep.
So.
And that was passed like about 2 months ago, right, Doug?
Yeah, that was in June or July.
Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry. I just must have totally missed that. What was that about septic tanks?
There's an ordinance in Miami-Dade County that
Okay.
requires certain disclosures. It's only for that county, at least at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then all the others are still here. You have the kick-out clause, you have the lead base, housing for older people, persons, rezoning, lease options, lease purchase, defective drywall. We talked about that before. Coastal construction line addendums. Here you have the backup contracts, pre-closing, post-closing, sale of buyer's property. So if there's a contingency that the buyer has to sell their property first before they can purchase, you would be including this. Licensing property interest, if you are or any of the licensees included in the transaction are related to the buyer and or seller, that must be disclosed in any way. If you are the brother, sister, son, uncle, you're related in any way, you must disclose. And that is the licensee property interest right here. Any questions on addendums and stuff? You good? Okay. Additional terms, this is where you can add the verbiage. Counter offers, line 610. So if you're on the seller side and you're gonna send this back, there used to be a form, a counter offer form, which some certain parts of area still use, of Florida still use it. But it's not required anymore. You actually have an opportunity here on the contract to do it. And what the seller would actually do is place a check mark here, right? And they would do any cross-offs with initials. Let's say they want to cross off the inspection period. Buyer's asking for 3 weeks inspection. And the seller says, no, you need to get it done in 7 days. And you're gonna cross it off, make sure that the initials are there, and you send back with the initials. It is not an executed contract until the buyer acknowledges those changes and has initialed it as well. That's what an acknowledgement is. All right. So you don't have to use that counter offer form anymore, but you can. And then some lenders or some sellers or buyers or agents might even ask you to do the contract over. Any questions on that? Obviously, this is where everybody acknowledges and signs. Make sure you're putting your information in here. Very often do I see agents put their name and their brokerage, and then they put a percentage sign of what they think their commission should be paid. You shouldn't be putting that on a contract. Number one, you're not a party to the contract. Okay. Now, your receipt to prove how much commission you're earning on the transaction is actually through your MLS listing. That is your actual receipt. What is being offered on the MLS is your compensation. That's why at HomeSmart, we make that a required document. We want to see a copy of the MLS printout. Because if there's any objection or anything on what's being paid or what was actually listed, we have a copy of that. Any questions on the as is? No? Questions on the addendums? All right, great. Next week, we are going to tap into, we're going to start doing, actually, I want to cover the listing agreement because there's some confusions on how to fill that out.
Hey, Freddie, I'm sorry, I missed you a little bit. I just changed networks to see if I can get more stable. This is Tammy. At the bottom of the contract, 2 questions for you.
Yes.
If it's a counter offer, I mean, not counter offer. Yes, if we attach a counter offer, what am I thinking about here? I'm thinking about where we don't sign, that's it. They submit an offer and we attach the counter offer form. Because if there's more than just one change, I like to do that.
Okay.
And then we have the seller sign the bottom of the counter offer form. And at the bottom of the far bar, or as is, we just say reference counter. But I don't think that flies in the HomeSmart world, does it?
No, I'd rather see the changes on the contract as well. And let's open up the counteroffer addendum.
I'm all about the counter. To me, it shows a paper trail. And that's always been what I taught in my legalese life. And it's been pretty strong. The counter form supersedes the contract. So a lot of people think it confuses lenders and everybody once you start processing for closing. But to me, it's the main instrument to keep up with the paper trail on who countered first and who countered second. And if you redo the contract, you lose that.
And also to know who's on first and what's on second.
Right.
It's a good point.
Well, and so Freddie, what I've been doing lately, because I kind of get the sense that you like to see the signature on the far bar and the as is. So I just put the signature on the far bar and the as is, and then I put reference counter in all cap letters so that the title company knows there's a counter form they need to go look at.
That works. That's
And
perfect.
I don't say which counter. I don't say whether it's 01, 02, 03, because we give them a good package as soon as we have a contract.
Right.
So Tammy,
yeah,
my info
I love
came
this
from-
form. I love this form as well because it does avoid those revisions going back and forth on the same contract and then having to redo it.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
My
but this is
info
what the
came
form looks
straight
like.
from someone who sits on the farms committee with the state. And
Yep.
once I was explained the dynamics behind it, it made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I've tried to get on that committee, so if you can help me, let me know.
We'll chat later. Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Any questions on the counter offer form? Thanks for bringing it up, Tammy. And you notice here, this is intended to be a legally binding contract. Right there. All righty. All right, so I'm gonna wrap this up for today. If nobody's got any other questions or feedback, or if anybody wants to throw anything in. Doug, do you want to add anything, or Scott?
I don't have anything to add, but let us know what we're going to talk about next time, and make sure that we're able to add some color to it.
All right, so next week, I wanted to cover the listing agreement, the exclusive right of sale listing agreement.
Okay.
And then that shouldn't take more than one session. And then after that, we can cover the other residential purchase contract.
Freddie, I do have a quick question. Well, I hope it's quick. On the new as is, there's a survey section under the standards of real estate. Not in there's two sections that say survey there. I forget what line numbers. It's the second one. In where it states that if the survey isn't provided in time to provide a marketable title, the way I understand it, it then extends or gives you the ability to extend the contract.
Juan, was this a new
Right there.
term?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
All right, so let's read this. If the survey discloses encroachments on the real property or that improvements located thereon encroach on setback lines, easements, or land of others, or violate any restrictions, covenants, or applicable governmental regulations described in Standard A, and it goes on to list the paragraphs above, buyer shall deliver written notice of such matters together with a copy of the survey to the seller within 5 days after buyer's receipt of the survey, but no later than closing. If buyer timely delivers such notice and survey to the seller, such matters identified in the notice and survey shall constitute a title defect, subject to cure obligations of Standard A above. If seller has delivered a prior survey, seller shall, at buyer's request, execute an affidavit of no change to the real property since the preparation of such prior survey to extend the informations therein are true and correct. I don't know if that actually answers your question.
Well, no, that's what when I read that, it indicated, that subject to the obligations of Standard A, and Standard A indicates there, if it's not a marketable title, that I guess that you allow 30 days, even as much as 120 days to cure. And that's what I'm wondering, if I read that right.
Doug, can you chime in on that one? We're talking about right here, extending a cure period for a specified period not to exceed 120 days within the seller shall continue to be used reasonable diligent, lines 395.
Right, because as I read it, and I want to make sure I'm right, but let's say the survey comes back and there's an encroachment of a fence in another person's property, or the other person's property is encroaching on yours, and makes the title not marketable, then obviously you would notify the seller saying, hey, there's a boundary dispute here. You need to get that fixed before we go further.
Correct.
I think in a situation like that, it would probably be if the property was landlocked, not if there was a dispute over a fence or something like that. That's I think that's part of what would make a property unmarketable. But that traditionally doesn't happen, but that's the kind of thing that you would want to have fixed, so you would have access to the property. Traditionally, when there's a dispute with a fence, both property owners will get their surveys out and they'll be amicable neighbors and have it fixed if they're going to move it 2 feet on the other person's property or back and forth. One of the
Right.
things is that, like, if a swimming pool is built into an easement, that doesn't mean that the property is unmarketable. That just means that the title insurance policy would basically take subject to it. And so in the event that they would have to come through and utilize that easement to fix something, that pool may be destroyed. So that may be something to have considered, whether that property would then be marketable or not, or the policy for insurance would just be use it as an exclusion to the policy itself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I guess in this specific, for this specific buyer of mine, their concern is, and they got burnt once and don't want to get burnt again, is that they're looking to buy this property, and in the back, there are no clear delineation of where the property line goes to. And they want to make sure that this property that has, what do they call it? You know, the lanai, that the lanai is actually built within their property lines, not into somebody else's property line. And that will constitute a survey, obviously. This is a competitive situation. They're making a cash offer with a tight inspection period and tight closing period. And they know they're not going to be able to get the survey within the inspection period time, but they will probably get the survey within a few days after. They wanted to know if then that makes that property unmarketable. Can they cancel the contract?
I think it's risky if they go outside the inspection period on that. So they're going to have to extend the inspection period, or they're going to have to get that survey done within the time limit to find that out. It does become, basically it gives them 30 days to cure it, or it can be canceled. But I think that is it's a little risky with the as-is inspection on that type of thing.
Okay.
So they might have to take the risk on that.
Okay.
Or
I mean,
have
but yeah, and
another provision that addresses it specifically, just the
Right.
deny, not anything else.
I mean, other than the, I was going to say, other than the property being on somebody else's property line, or like Scott mentioned, there's no access to the property. I don't see many things that could happen that could make the title unmarketable.
I agree.
Not at least, and this is in a subdivision already, and the home was, it's all subdivision homes, and so in a PUD, I guess, area. So I don't know. Okay, I won't be a surveyor.
And most lenders, if it's a cash deal, a survey is not required, but it's strongly recommended. But most lenders will actually ask for a survey. The problem is that they usually requested it at the end. So
Yeah.
I would, that's usually the last thing they request is the survey, right, Scott? Is that the way you see it?
Well, traditionally, that's the way it used to be, but because the surveyors are so far behind, when we find out that it's a lender deal, we automatically go ahead and order the survey right off the bat, because it usually takes 7 to 10 days.
Right.
In your situation, since it's a subdivision, there's probably a plat that you can take a look at that spells out the boundary lines, and it shows where the property is itself. So that would be a good indication on whether, like, this particular land is in someone else's property or not. I highly doubt it is, but that is one option. If you want to reach out to us, we can pull a plat copy for you and take a look, just so you have some ease of mind. So we can do that on a separate email if you want to do that with us.
Okay, I will talk to my buyer and let you know.
All right, if we have no other questions, I actually have to get going. I have another meeting with our corporate staff in Arizona in about 10 minutes. So if anybody Any other questions or concerns or feedback? I want to thank you all for participating. Thanks, Doug and Scott, again. You guys always showing up. I love it. Thank you. And we'll see you again next Wednesday, 9 a.m.
Put it in your books, everybody. Orlando Smarts Giving is next week, Friday on the 19th. Is that next week, Friday? Oh, please. Yeah, next week, Friday, 9 days away on the 19th at approximately 11 to something. Bring a dish to pass. I'm going to be sending you all out a form. If you're coming, please let me know what delicious, delightful dish you'll be bringing. That's all I got.
And it'll be at the Orlando branch.
Yes, sir.
So come break bread with your peers.
Scott said he's going to bring like 14 dishes to pass. I was like, Scott, that's so generous of you. And Doug, we really appreciate you guys.
And then we got some holiday parties coming up, so stay tuned for the announcements on that. We're actually going to be holding several of them, regional, one in Orlando, one down in Nokomis as well, and one in Tampa, St. Pete area. And I'm probably going to jump down to Miami and go see my Miami peoples as well. So just stay tuned for those dates. They're coming up, and you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, folks.
Have a
Bye.
good one.